Gospel of Mark, that's a New Testament book, is it not? Okay. Comes after Matthew, Luke? Okay, I'm there. Mark chapter 5. So, I was considering doing this sermon out of James, and I'm sure I'll be doing it someday here. But I was reading on the idea of taking oath and how we are to let our yes be yes and our no be no, right? And it's interesting in considering what we do today that it seems like our word is no longer our bond. That's why when you consider, and I know everybody's going to argue, well, it's just wise to do it this way. But if you consider why our society is so wrapped up in all sorts of contracts that you have to sign, right? And all these things that you have to put your name on to assure someone else that you're actually going to be honest, right? And there's this new show I've been watching on Netflix. It's a car restoration show. And one thing that they always do when they make the agreement on the car, after the guy does all this kind of custom work on it, is when they finally get to a price, they reach out and they shake each other's hands. And you know, they haggle with it and then they shake each other's hands. Well, in one of the episodes, the guy says he's talking to a guy on the phone in Virginia and he wants to buy this car from him. And he says, "Can we do a handshake over the phone?" And the guy says, "Yes, we can do a handshake over the phone, that we agree on this." Because that says something about how they view that. They view that as your word is your bond, right? And if you shake the hand of somebody, then you're assuring them that what I've said I'm going to be holding to. I will fulfill what it is that I've claimed that I will fulfill. In the Gospel of Mark, when we are considering the idea of who Jesus is and why we have assurances in him, what is it about him that would be considered this proverbial handshake? That if he says what he says, that we can actually trust in that. That, you know, he's not going to make a claim to us, a promise to us, and then not fulfill that promise. And part of it certainly has to do with his nature. If we understand that he is the Son of God, and as Paul writes in Titus chapter 1, it's impossible for God to lie, that what Jesus claims in is like saying his word is his bond. It's impossible for him to make a claim about something and not fulfill that claim, whether it's good or bad. If he says, you know, these are the things that are going to happen, God doesn't lie about those things. So in looking at Jesus, we certainly can say, well, I have the assurance that Jesus is who he claimed to be because he's God. But you see, we're on the other side of his resurrection, right? And that was one of the things that really put that final recognition that Jesus was who he claimed to be, and that when he goes to the cross and he dies, his resurrection is that which, as Paul says in Romans chapter 1, proves him to be the Son of God. If it wasn't enough that he was making these claims and he was working these miracles, it seems that resurrection is also tied to that. So the audiences of the time were yet at that point of the resurrection of Jesus. So when you're looking at, for example, the Gospel of Mark, certainly Mark was written after the resurrection of Jesus, but the majority of the occurrences in Mark take place before his resurrection, during his lifetime. So the information they have is what they're seeing right then and there. And they can't go to the resurrection and say, hey, we know that he was the Christ. Even in the book of Acts, when Peter is arguing to the Jews there on the day of Pentecost that Jesus is the Christ, he uses the resurrection as that final push for them. This Jesus whom you crucified, God did what? He resurrected him. So, and you know that he did this. So, what is it about Jesus then in those early years gave people the assurance that they could follow him, that they could commit their lives to him and know before all these other things had happened that he was in fact who he claimed to be. And if you consider the example that we have of the apostles following Jesus, that they were willing to abandon careers in their respective fields of expertise, fishermen, tax collectors, whatever they may have been. You know, Paul, tent maker, that they left these things back. Now, Paul's a little different because he's after that. But they left behind their careers and followed after Jesus, abandoned family businesses and went after Jesus. What was it that assured them that they could do that and that he, in fact, was who he claimed to be? Well, one of the things that we have as we go through the New Testament and look at the occurrences of Jesus' life were certain things that he was doing that led people to accept him. It wasn't just what he was saying, it was also what he was doing. And this, and let me just kind of go back a little bit on this. This is where that handshake comes into play. You can shake the hand of an individual one time and they can suppose that you're going to be honest. But if you don't fulfill that handshake, and I'm just using this as an illustration, then word is going to get around that just because that man shakes your hand doesn't mean he's going to follow through with what he said. In other words, he's a dishonest man. Yeah, no problem. Shake my hand on it. We'll shake on it. And then later on, it doesn't come true. Did you guys ever see that that movie with Michael Keaton about McDonald's? Oh, yeah. You see that? Do you remember the scene where they're trying to, at the very end where they're signing the contract and signing everything over? He shook their hand on it. Remember that? And then he never paid them. He never paid the McDonald brothers the money. He just stole the company out from under them. And the deal was, he goes, well, I'm not going to sign a contract, but I'll shake your hand on it. Well, right then and there, that would have been a man that I never would have trusted. I'd have been like, I don't know why you think you can trust this guy right here, because he said he would do this, and then he doesn't follow through with it. You see, that's the difference with Jesus. Jesus was making claims of things, but he was also doing things that would give you assurance that what he says is lining up with what he does. And so I can put my faith and my trust in him to commit my life to him, because there's no time and place in his life where he ever said something and didn't follow through with what it was that he claimed. And when we go back and we look in the Gospel of Mark, we find a situation like this. Take a look at Mark chapter 5, in verses 21 through 24. And the point of this is that all that Jesus said and did supplies the assurance that we need to trust in him today. And look, I know some people find this silly. They say, well, how can you, 2,000 plus years later, trust a story that was written so long ago and actually say, I believe this. I believe what happened here. Well, I find it interesting that those same people will go back and read the history of the Roman people at that same time period, and they'll trust what was written about them. They'll say, oh, yeah, the Caesars, they ruled. How do you know that the Caesars ruled? How do we know that? Well, because we've got a document that says the Caesars ruled. Well, I got a document that says that Jesus lived. Oh, that's just somebody's story. Well, I think it's a story that the Caesars, I don't think there were actually any Caesars in Rome at the time. Well, that's just foolishness. How would you believe that? History shows. Well, history shows where? You got a video? No, we got written documentation. Yes, so do I. I got written documentation too. And it's almost as if people can just ignore this because it's the Bible, and certainly it can't be true, but they'll accept documents written on the same stuff, the same type of material, passed down, and even those stories, if you want to consider what would not be trustworthy, why would you even trust the stories about those individuals? You know, they always say that to the victor goes the spoils, and the victor gets to write the story. And sometimes the loser makes sure that when he loses, his story doesn't come out so bad about himself either. So, can we completely trust the historical account of all these people that lived back in the first century and beyond that point in time that we teach in school all the time about this is the history of the world. These are the people that ruled. How do you know that? We found a stone and this guy's name was etched on it. So there you go. Well, how do you know that somebody didn't take that stone and etch the name and make it look old and throw it out there in the sand and you found it? And now he's trying to sell it for $1 million and you're buying it. You know, people do that. They actually take things and they make them look old and they try to sell them. People have been ripped off because they purchased things that were actually not authentic. Have you ever seen Pawn Stars? They bring stuff all the time that they try to sell and it turns out it was a fake. It's like, no, that's a fake thing. It's like, it looks really good, but it's not real. So it's interesting to me that we have a document that if we're going to trust these other things, then we should just as readily trust this right here and what it has to say. And when you go back and you read the stories of Jesus' life and what he said and what he did, it's those things that give us reason to have assurance in the outcome of what our life will be if we dedicate ourselves and commit ourselves to him. So let's take a look over here in Mark chapter 5, in verses 21 through 24. Mark chapter 5, 21 through 24. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and so he stayed by the seashore. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up, and on seeing him, fell at his feet, and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her, so that she will get well and live." And went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. So we begin with this plea of Jairus, right? Jairus, he's a synagogue official, as the scriptures teach. Jesus had just left the country of the Gerasenes, and that's where we have the account of the Gerasene demoniac, where Jesus casts out the demons out of this individual. Jesus comes over to this place, and the synagogue official named Jairus approaches him. Now, as a synagogue official, he is fully aware of what the Old Testament text is going to teach on the Christ. He's aware of what the Messiah was supposed to be. He's one who manages the affairs of the synagogue, and he's a prominent figure. Now keep that in mind, because if you go back to the life of Jesus, you saw what happened when people were accepting of Christ, how the synagogue officials would cast them out, right? They wouldn't allow them to go in the synagogue. But this is a man that's in a prominent position, sort of like what we see in John chapter 3 with Nicodemus. Someone who was a prominent official, yet he was willing to recognize that what Jesus was saying and doing actually meant something. As Jairus approaches Jesus, he demonstrates his belief in his abilities. Now, I know some may say, well, this is a last-ditch effort. It's kind of like, Jairus has no other hope. His daughter's dying, so why not just give it one shot and go to this guy and plead for him to come over and heal his daughter? I don't believe that's the case. There's no indication that is the case, that he was just, taking a shot in the dark, that this character over here would be able to come over, this Jesus character would be able to come over and do that. In fact, even if he did that and he really didn't believe it, it still wouldn't look good for him. They were like, why did you do that? Why did you go over to this guy? You know who Jesus is. You know what he's been doing. And yet you're going, well, I didn't really believe he could do it, but I just thought it's like, no, it's not going to turn out good for him if he really didn't believe it, and he goes and he does that. But by the fact that he comes up and he falls at the feet of Jesus, right? He falls down at the feet of Jesus. He's entreating him. He's pleading with him to come and to help with his daughter. He asked Jesus to come, to lay his hands on her, that she might be healed. All of those actions show that this man believed that if Jesus would come and do this, that in fact his daughter would be healed. Why would he believe this? Because there had been previous situations where Jesus had healed other individuals. Take a look back in Mark chapter 1 and verse 21. So this is something that Jesus was known for. Miracles that happened. Mark chapter 1, beginning in verse 21. They went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and began to teach. They were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Just then there was a man in the synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." And Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." Throwing him into convulsions, the unclean spirit cried out with a loud voice and came out of him. They were all amazed, so that they debated among themselves, saying, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." And immediately the news about him spread everywhere in all the surrounding district of Galilee. So this synagogue official, Jairus, he's heard of what Jesus has done. And that's just one example of what Jesus did between that point in time and when he comes to Jairus. So he's heard. And what he's heard is enough for him to believe that Jesus can actually do what he claimed to do. Did Jairus see this? We have no indication that Jairus was there. But he heard about it, and that's all it took. He didn't have to be an eyewitness to it. He just had to hear other people saying, "You're not going to believe what Jesus did in the synagogue today. There was an individual with an unclean spirit. Jesus cast him out, and we witnessed this." He believed that. So much so that when his daughter was sick and at the point of death, he goes to Jesus, and he has full assurance that if Jesus will just come and lay his hands on his daughter, then she's going to be made well. So without question, Jairus believes that Jesus can heal his sick daughter. And then Jesus responds by going along with him. So think about that. And this is one of those points where I'm saying it's not only what he said, but it's what he does. If Jesus knew that he couldn't do what he was claiming to do, and that what he had done in the synagogue and on other occasions was just all a fraud, he couldn't set this event up to make it turn out positive for him. Like, oh, well, it's like these fake faith healers they have today where they make sure they pepper the audience with people that they can bring up to the stage and act like they're healing them and give them a few bucks later on and say, "Oh, look, we healed you and all these people believe us now." Jesus couldn't set this up. He was being called to go with Jairus. If he couldn't do it, he's a fool to go. But what does he do? His words and his actions go together. So him getting up and going with him is showing that Jairus would have assurance that his plea was going to be fulfilled because it was heard. So Jesus didn't hesitate to go with him. He saw an opportunity to demonstrate his authority once again, and that was something that was attached to what they were saying. He teaches with one with authority, and then when he did what he did, they recognized that as being one with authority as well. When we go back to Mark chapter 1:21, he was compassionate for the grief that Jairus was having over his only daughter. And in Luke chapter 8, verses 41 and 42, we see in the counter to this, we do see the compassion he felt for him. It was not only Jesus and Jairus that went, but there was a great multitude that followed. Now, certainly, I would think that in that crowd, there were some who were going to try to see if, in fact, he could do what he claimed to do. There were doubters in that crowd. But I also believe that there were people in that crowd who believed Jesus could do what he claimed that he could do, and they were going to go because they were sure of this, and they wanted to witness the work that God was doing through his son. Along the way, Jesus then encounters this woman with the issue of blood, and he heals her. That's another part of the story, and we're not going to be talking about that right now. She reaches out and she touches him, and she's healed. But even in that story, there's another account of assurance. She believed that if she could just touch him, that she would be made better. Why did she believe that? Because just like Jairus, if she did not witness this, what he had done before in the synagogue, she had at least heard of it. I mean, there's no sense for her to go out there. It's like this woman has an issue of blood, and she just walks around touching everybody going, "I hope this person heals me. I hope this person heals me. I hope this person heals me. I just believe if I just keep touching somebody, I'll finally be healed." No, she went to him because she believed that just being there and touching him would be enough to bring about a healing. She didn't question it. She was willing to push her way through a crowd to get there to be in his presence. She absolutely believed that. And it wasn't just because this was some made-up story. It was because there was evidence that he was who he claimed to be. He was giving them evidence in all the things that he said. Remember, in the synagogue, he spoke with authority first, right? That's what they saw that. He spoke as one with authority, and then he healed the man or cast out the demon, and again they saw authority with that. So it wasn't just what he said, it's what he did. That goes back to what I was saying at the beginning with the illustration. It's not enough to just do something or just to say something. They have to go together. You can shake somebody's hand and say, oh, you can trust me, and then not do it. Or you can say, trust me, and then shake their hand and not do it. Either way. You have to do both. And Jesus did both. He spoke it, and then he did it. And by doing that, people were able to put their faith and trust in him that he was going to fulfill whatever it is he was going to do. Take a look over at Mark chapter 5 now in verses 35 through 43. What Jesus shows them then is the power that he has over death. And this is where you really begin to build on trusting in him for life eternal. Because this is a young lady who has died. Right? Now, when you go back and read the beginning of this, go back to chapter 5 here, in verse 21. In verse 23 says, my little daughter is at the point of death. Right? Now, let's go down to verse 35 and begin here. While he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore? Now think about this. The people that came out did not really have the right concept of who Jesus was. So they believed that as long as she was alive, I suppose he could do something. But now that she's dead, there's no need to go any further with this. Why bother him? She's dead. So their assurance in Jesus was limited, if they had any, these individuals, if they had any, was limited to only what he could do here while you were still alive. He was like a physician. You see, as a doctor, as long as you're alive, he can try to heal you, and he may. But when you're dead, he cannot heal you, and he cannot bring you back to life. You're dead. So they kind of viewed him, I suppose, in that way. So their assurance of what he could provide for them was very limited as far as they saw it. Why bother the teacher? She's dead. But keep this in mind. Jesus, when he's going there, is going there to heal a sick girl. When he gets there, he finds a young girl who's dead. Now, I believe in the providence of God. And I believe that this woman that interrupts his travel, even as briefly as it may be, interrupted his travel so that this girl might pass from life. Because there was something greater that needed to be demonstrated here. And Jesus needed to provide greater assurance than, hey, I can take care of you while you're alive, but once you're dead, all bets are off. I don't have any power beyond life. I don't have any power beyond this life. I can be a teacher to you now, and I can tell you some good things now, and I can make you better now like your physician, but beyond that, I can't do that. So when he gets there, as we find, he's going to go even further and provide greater assurance for us that who he is claiming to be and what he is claiming he's able to do, in fact, we can have full assurance that it's real. Keep reading with me. But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, this is verse 36, said to the synagogue official, do not be afraid any longer, only what? Believe. Only believe. And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the synagogue official, and when he saw a commotion and people loudly weeping and wailing, and entering in, he said to them, why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep. Now, Jesus doesn't literally mean that she's just resting, right? He's going to show them she's dead, she's dead. And that's certainly the case. They witnessed this. Because if she was just asleep, like really just asleep, I'm pretty sure that all the commotion and wailing would have woken her up. He would have walked in there, she'd been like, man, what's all that noise going on? Well, they thought you were dead, but you're really not. They began laughing at him. But putting them all out, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions and entered the room where the child was. Again, this is another indication that she's not just asleep. Because if she's just asleep, he'd say, wait, just watch. What you do with Jaden in the morning. Up and at him, boy. Get out of bed. Throw water in his face. Yeah, that's what they do. Don't even deny it. All right. So you just wake him up. Why are you putting everybody out? Why are you going to be so secretive if she's just really just asleep? She's dead. So he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions and entered the room where the child was. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said that something should be given her to eat. Now I want you to think about this for a second, how he responds to them. So in this room, who do you have with him? You have James, you have John, and you have Peter. And then you have the mother and the father. Now, it says here in verse 42, and immediately they were completely astounded. They were completely astounded. Well, who was completely astounded? Just the mother and father? No. I believe that Peter, James, and John were also astounded at this. That they had just witnessed something that they had not seen before. Imagine what that would do to you if you were a disciple of Christ, an apostle of Jesus, and you witnessed that. That this girl was dead, and Jesus just calls her up. Doesn't do any fancy thing, right? Not throwing anything at her, sprinkling, not giving her some concoction, right? What does it say he did? He said, taking the child by the hand, he said to her, little girl, I say to you, get up. Talitha cum, get up. And she does. So they were astounded. Now, let me give you another reason why she's not sleeping. Jesus took her by the hand and said, get up. You're not astounded if your sleeping child gets up when you say, get up. Okay, maybe some parents are. They're like, I can't believe you actually got up when I told you to get up. Okay, sometimes parents are astounded. But that's not a reason for these individuals to just be completely astounded by the fact that Jesus took her by the hand and told her to get up, and she was just asleep, and she got up. No, she was dead. I suppose what Jesus is saying to them is that what he's about to do in resurrecting her from the dead is as easy as waking a sleeping child, right? She's just asleep. What I'm about to do, I'm going to resurrect this child who is dead, but it's going to be as if I'm just waking up a sleeping child. And he says, get up. And she does. Even the apostles were astounded at this. And that's what it seems to indicate here. So that act itself then creates within these people this assurance that you can trust in Jesus and what he claims. And even more so than just doing the miracles that he was doing on earth and the teaching he was giving there, he just gave them something beyond this life. He just did something that points beyond this life. And that is, if you die, Jesus can bring you back from the dead. Peter, James, and John, and her mother, and her father, and this girl all know that. They are fully assured that whatever Jesus claims he's doing, he can in fact do. He has authority over death. And that is something that we also need to understand. Just like the synagogue official and the woman with the issue of blood did not have to be at the synagogue in Mark chapter 1 when Jesus did what he did to believe in him, I don't don't have to be in that upper room with Jesus or in that room with Jesus when he heals this young lady. I don't have to be there to believe that he was able to do it. I have the account that it took place. By inspiration, it's been revealed to me as a historical fact that there was this daughter of the synagogue official who had died. She was sick. Before Jesus got there, she died. And when Jesus went up to her, although the people around said there was no reason for him to go there anymore because she had died, he went in and he resurrected this young lady from the dead. And I also have the assurance then that Jesus has power over death. So Jesus wants us to know that when we are committing ourselves to him, and think about this act, what is he? Is he just like, you know what? I think I'll just go heal somebody because got nothing else to do, I'll go heal somebody. I always believe that when you look at the acts of Jesus and the things that he was doing, there's always intended purpose behind them. And the intended purpose is not merely to heal them. There's always something else there. And I believe the greater message there is telling us who this man is, so that we can have assurance, no doubt. Believe, he says, right? Believe. That we would have no doubt in our minds that the things that he claimed to do, he did, and we can trust and have full assurance in him that he will also do that for us. So if Jesus could raise this young lady, if we can go to the Gospel of John and see him resurrecting Lazarus, if we can see that, then we can be fully assured that Jesus will do that for us as well, because he's claimed, has stated, that he would in fact do those things. So this young lady was dead. She was not merely asleep, and Jesus uses it as an opportunity to teach us a lesson. He tells us something about who he is. So when we consider our lives today and we're asking ourselves as we follow Christ, where is our assurance in him? What is it that assures us that the life that we've committed to Jesus is worth committing to him, or that he's worth us committing our life to? What is it about him that we say, well, yeah, I'm a Christian? It's like, well, why are you a Christian? Well, because Jesus. Well, who's Jesus? Why would you follow him? Well, because it's like you see these so-called prophets that are out there today making all these claims, and none of these claims come true, and yet people are still willing to follow them. They continue to get a gathering of all these people who are going to just continue committing themselves to these. I'm like, why do you people do that? Why do you people willingly commit yourself to somebody when they've made all these claims and none of their claims have ever come true? See, when I commit myself to Christ, I do so because his claims did come true. And I have it written down. I have it recorded in history that he lived. And that the life he lived in serving God. And the things that he did actually happened. And the words that he spoke, he actually spoke. It's recorded for me. And so when I commit my life to him, I'm not committing. If I would open up this book and I would read about this man named Jesus who made all these claims and none of those things happened, I wouldn't follow him. Why do people follow guys today that make all these claims and nothing they say actually happens, but they still follow them? That's just foolishness. But that's not the way. What assurance do you have that this person is even speaking for or from God? Well, because the way he talks. But every time he says something, he makes these predictions, and they don't happen. And yeah, you guys are just committing your life to him. I watched this documentary the other day on what went wrong in Waco with the, whatever that group it was, Eric. What's the name of that group? You guys remember them? David Koresh. And what went wrong? And I was just amazed at the people that were just willing to listen to this guy. You know, he'd get there and just speak for hours. Okay, maybe I'm not one to talk about that, but I don't speak for hours like that. But he would just go on, and they commit their lives to him. You know, I'm going to have a couple of wives from you people there too. Okay. I'm like, What is wrong with you people? Has anything he said or done aligned with what this says? He calls himself a prophet, yet he does all the things that show him not to be a prophet. Yet people follow him. And here's Jesus, who proved himself every time to be what he claimed. And yet people go, I'm not going to follow him. Wow, that's just amazing. Well, I'm going to put my faith in the Christ. I'm going to put my faith in Jesus because I have assurance. And just this one account, and there's multiple accounts, but this one account of this man, this synagogue official, who, from all indication, doesn't show that he ever saw Jesus do anything, but he believed that he could. In all likelihood, according to what we read in the first part of Mark chapter 1, is because word spread and he heard about it. And he said, I want to go to this man because he can take care of my daughter. We have assurance in Jesus because he showed and proved himself to be what he claimed.